And we're live. It is Friday, the 30th day of May. It is the year of our Lord 2025. And for the first time in a number of days, I can honestly say that the sun is shining in Washington, D.C. We've had a spell of storms, we've had flooding, we've had, misting. It's been, a thing. But now the sun is out once again. You can see it streaming through the windows that surround me in the I still don't know what to call my upstairs studio space. The birds are chirping. It is going to be a great freaking day. And unfortunately, Holly is not here today, so we don't have the cactus to say it. So I'll just say it myself. You're watching Dog Shirt TV. It is a goddamn revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features, of which there are many, is that every now and then, somebody writes on Lawfare a truly eccentric piece, and I text them, why don't you come on Dog Shirt TV tomorrow to discuss? And they respond, sure. And so that is how we book the show. And then another one of the revolutionary features is that sometimes I invite another person who makes a cameo appearance in the article and say, hey, why don't you join too? And he says, sure. And a third one of the revolutionary features of the show is that every now and then, in the run up to the show, both guests text me, we're all on a chain together, and say, hey, 8 a.m. is really early. And they both turn out not to be ready yet. And I sort of shrug and say, fine, because I can do a monologue by myself. And they just show up when they show up. So here's the first of them, Tyler McBrien, who has absolutely no excuse not to be ready at 8 a.m. because he is, uh, you know, he has no morning obligations. He was just sleeping in and didn't want to be, troubled to be ready by 8 o'clock. So, but we tolerate that because uh, it's a revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that it really doesn't matter if people show up on time. Hello, Tyler McBrien.
Good morning. I would say that a in-depth morning routine is an obligation. If not,
Uh,
I don't have any dependents who are
yeah,
waiting for me.
I am just teasing you because a fourth one of the revolutionary features of the show, of which, as I say, there are many, is that we actually never expect Anna Bauer to show up on time for anything, not for a meeting, not for, well, with Lawfare Live, we have this arrangement that we expect her to show up before it actually starts most of the time, but the idea that she will be late is just kind of part of the color of the wallpaper. And so the idea that I'm going to have to vamp for 4 minutes and 20 seconds before any of the guests shows up causes me no stress at all. And you know and yeah, so all of which is a 4 minute and 35-second way of saying that we are not allowed to have fun anymore. But we are allowed to have Tyler McBrien and Anna Bauer to discuss Anna's. As I say, it could be the most eccentric piece we have ever run on Lawfare, and that includes my challenge to Vladimir Putin to a mano fist fight. And it also includes the piece, not forgotten by those who remember lawfare lore, by the estimable Margaret Taylor, taking responsibility for the fact that some crazy guy went around the State Department with a bullwhip, to intimidate his colleagues. And Margaret had been responsible for vetting said gentleman on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and had thought he was going to be a reasonable a nominee for the position. And so wrote a kind of apology for getting State Department whip guy completely wrong. This article out eccentrics, I think, all previous lawfare articles. Um, uh,
There was a third one we were talking about recently that it was even news to me. I'm blanking on the subject matter, but I don't know. That's a pretty amazing distinction given some of the work in the
well,
lawfare archives.
I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, there was the drone strike cake, but
Yes.
which was its own level of weird. And um uh but that was really deep in our blog days. Somebody sent me a picture of the drone strike cake, which was a scene of a drone strike in Yemen done in fondant, and I just slapped it up on the site. Uh and
Do you miss those days sometimes? I don't
I
know if that was
you
past
know
mustard today.
that's why I created Dog Shirt
There's a little
Daily,
wistfulness in
actually.
your voice.
Well, it was
I
to
caught it.
bring back the time when I just did shit, and nobody else was responsible for it. And it was fun, and we had fun with it. And, lawfare, that child grew up, and now we have to take care of its reputation and stuff. But that's why we have Dog Shirt Daily, because we don't have to take care of its reputation. And I can I use this opportunity to bring to your attention that today's Dog Shirt Daily is the first time in my life I have ever denounced one of my children in public. Um, and, you know,
I don't want to be accomplice to this, whatever's about to
uh,
happen.
no, no, no. Look, when the subject of l'affaire Drosophila first arose on Dog Shirt TV the other day, I kept EJ's name out of it. There are other people it could have been. Most viewers, readers don't actually know how many children I have. So I called him Child X.
Not to be
Well,
confused with Elon's child.
yes, exactly. Um, and EJ chose to out himself by way of writing a defense for, as he puts it, who hasn't loosed a biblical swarm of insects on his household at some point. Um,
Who among us?
and then yesterday he went a step too far, which is he added to Dog Shirt Daily a push poll declaring himself innocent. And he got 61% of you to click that he was innocent. And I just want to say that you guys are freaking gullible, because, there are many things that EJ is, but one of them is not innocent in l'affaire Drosophila. He was the perp, and nobody who saw the volume of insect biomass in our house could possibly have clicked yes on that. So Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, when you said I'm that he loosed plague of insects, and then he went a step too far, I thought you were going to say that he took someone's firstborn or something, like the next
Well, no,
plague
no,
up.
the biblical plague of insects was more than 10 years ago. And I will say that I would be happy to put it behind us. But, he hijacked my newsletter to write a closing argument in his own defense on the matter, and then had the temerity to insert a push poll in which he got my readership to declare that he was innocent. And I just think, look, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, I'm going to respect the will of the people here. Um, I don't believe in double jeopardy, but I'm going to express that he snowed you all, people.
Someone in the chat suggested that there was no mens rea, so you were missing a key element of the crime there. So that's why he got off.
So that person in the chat is incorrect. Although witty, there may be no mens rea in the original cultivation of hundreds of thousands, millions of Drosophila, but there was sure mens rea in the cover up because that child knew that they were coming from that the Drosophila were coming from his room, and
I think the cover up also makes it a felony. It was
yeah, exactly.
Another
There was
crime.
like a step up
Yeah.
crime here. So you can say that the original production of the biohazard was, sort of merely reckless, but did not have the mens rea required for felonious conviction. But there is just no way you can make that argument about the cover up, which of course is worse than the crime, as always. So, Tyler, while we're waiting for Anna Bauer, who may show up eventually, I want to get your reaction the first when you read this piece.
Well, actually, it's probably good that I'm going first. I know I'm the opening act here, and we're waiting for the main event. But my reaction was, it was even crazy. Well, I guess I was expecting her to sound crazier because I knew she was working on this and she's been screaming into the void for so long, and I kept hearing that the word count was increasing, and I was like, oh no, she's gonna sound deranged. But really, she's not the crazy one in this story. It's the Schrodinger's administrator. It's this just Kafka-esque battle that she's waging in the courts and on social media. And I think really she comes out as the sane person, which really surprised
It's
me.
interesting because I want to share with you two texts I got yesterday. One from an esteemed lawyer in town who wrote to me, "This is nuts. It sounds like a diary of a teenager on crack." Um, the other of which came from a member of the Greek chorus. "This is insane."
But again, what
And
is this? Is it this being the situation that she's finding herself in, or this being her in this
well,
piece?
I think
Yeah.
that's like, and part of the ambience of the piece is the situation is driving me slowly and steadily insane, and so there's um uh it's a um like it's designed to have this sort of manic tone. Um,
And it's amazing that there's so much to vamp off of for this one question, because there's so many other things that are maddening with regard to Doge over the past few months. Like, we didn't even there wasn't even room to talk about, for example, the website of savings that kept changing, and then the number that kept shifting and expanding and then shrinking. So even just taking this one question and mixing it around gives you so much material, which was also impressive, I thought.
yeah, I mean, it kind of has the quality of, you know, a law review article about the appointments clause and Doge meets Bridget Jones's diary
Exactly. With emojis.
with emoji. Well, I added the emojis. Um, um, yeah. Um, so, um, uh, 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 Yeah, so when you like first you make one cameo appearance in the article, and I cut a second one, which is actually you should be in the opening scene, um, but I cut it to streamline the opening scene, which is where Anna first shouts, "Who is the administrator of DOGE?" at a lawyer for the government, and he responds, "I don't know the answer to that." Um, so
Or
you were
yeah, he
there.
didn't know how to answer that, and it also it had uh what had just happened in the courtroom was he didn't know how to answer really any question with regard to Doge. Its structure, its goal, its actions. This was I think access to the Treasury data case. But I also want to say the reference to Anna showing up in court late without any paper was absolutely true. I was like, I remember waiting for the hearing to start at SDNY, this very august mahogany beautiful room, and I'm just kept like glancing back at the door, and within seconds of them about to close, they were about to close the door and she wouldn't have come in, she bursts in, sits down next to me, and just goes, "Shit, do you have any paper?" And we got shushed, and I gave her a bunch of paper. So it was on brand, as they would say.
Um, yeah, so uh, tell us about the time when you text her, "You okay, bro?"
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like she had been on this beat, if you want to call it that. I think bit is a better word for it, for about a month. And I thought it was, the more and more I thought about it, I started to understand how substantive asking the same question was over and over. But it started to take on this all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, Jack Nicholson at his typewriter in The Shining kind of character to me. So that's why I texted her, "You good, bro?" As a joke, but also
But was
there was
that
some
in
truth there.
response, like in the piece, she describes it as like immediately following when she tweeted out, "Who is the administrator of DOGE? Who is
Exactly.
the
Yes. It was
administrator
it
of..."
was those lines over and over and over, and it was a joke of a text, but there was some genuine concern just under the surface.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, the other moment that you uh I mean, again, I'll just be candid, played a role in the draft, and then I took it out, was this uh was this origin story moment on um uh the 14th of February, aka Valentine's Day. And did you realize when you saw, so the exchange is where you're in the courthouse, the lawyer is fleeing the scene of his appearance before in the case, and Anna shouts at him, "Who's the administrator of DOGE?" which is sort of like the original um, uh, invocation of WITAOD, and he responds that he doesn't know. And my question is, were you aware at that time that you were witnessing the origin story of the Joker?
I'd like to say that I knew that I was witnessing history. But no, I was honestly, like I said, I was still fixated on the fact that he couldn't answer anything about Doge, especially its goal and its efficiency toward what. There was just no sense of anything. So I now I see the value in this refrain of asking this one question. But like I said, there were just so many unknowns about Doge. There were
So
so
it
many
just didn't make
unknown unknowns. It didn't.
it didn't make that much of an impression
No,
at the
and
time.
that's why
I
Anna's the model reporter, and I'm the
I actually remember. Because we were there with Peter from ABC. We were standing
Mhm.
there, both who cruelly got edited out of the story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Um,
I took out all the other
We
characters,
spent our Valentine's
including
Day
the
in federal court
including
for
the fact that
nothing.
Anna showed up at this hearing with no paper, no, I forget the other things that you
Seconds
didn't
from the door shutting in your face, I remember.
Right. And she borrows, like, she goes to court with no paper to write on and says to Tyler, can I have some paper? Um, yeah, all that stuff was super funny. It all came out because we had to have the opening of the story just focus on Anna's development of this obsessive, one might say manic urge to hurl the same question in every official's face.
But I specifically remember like the reason. I think maybe I was going to New York anyway to like for something with one of my friends. Like I was there for some reason anyway, but I also remember being like I have to go to New York definitely now because I have to go to this hearing and I have to find out
To
if
find out who the
the
administrator of
administrative
DOGE is.
judges
Yeah.
because I'd been
I'll go to New York, I'll find out.
right, I'll go to New York and I'll find out. And I show up to this hearing that I like came all this way to go to, and I realized that I didn't bring a notebook. I'm like late.
Well, that's out of character.
Tyler had to. Okay, not for court hearings though. Usually, I am not late for court hearings, and
Can I
I
say
feel
one thing
You're-
about
you're
the
sometimes
notes?
like 15 hours early.
Yeah,
Just one thing
I-
about the notes. So I ripped off what I thought was more than enough paper, and then I look over in like 5 minutes, and Anna taps me, and she gives me a look like, "Can I have some more paper?" And I look at your notes, and your letters are like this tall. There's like 5 words per paper, and you're just like maniacally, yeah.
I was not doing a good job of managing the paper situation, and also they were because they were torn out, they were all loose, and there was this moment.
That's
Tyler,
great.
I hope you remember this. I was sitting on the aisle and all of my papers went flying into the aisle. So like I had like all these papers and there was this marshal who I think saw me like just kind of being like really klutzy and like annoying.
Like your
And
briefcase spilled open and jelly beans spilled out everywhere.
And at one point, I whispered something to Tyler during like a break when the judge was having a sidebar, and he came over and he was like, "No talking." And then afterward, I saw one of my friends who was clerking, and who not for that judge, but happened to be around and saw everything happen, and he was like, what's up with the hall monitor situation because I had so visibly been like scolded by this marshal. But so then we go.
Hey, at least you hadn't been thrown out of the court for taking a picture of somebody's dog shirt.
I was
Somebody's
afraid I was going to be thrown out by association.
which is an anecdote in Jonah Bromwich's new book. So everyone should check it
I
out.
started reading Jonah Bromwich's new book about last night after listening to his excellent conversation with Anna on the Lawfare podcast. And I have to say, I was amused by how much time he spends in the first chapter describing the culture of the line, which is a culture that previously has really been a province only of lawfare. So glad to see the New York Times catching up with lawfare
Line scoops, yeah.
on line scoops.
But hey, you heard it here first about the line.
Lawfare is the first draft of history.
And
All
you
right,
heard
not
it
the
here
other.
first about the administrator of DOGE, but what I was going to say about the being like when we were standing outside with Peter and Tyler, I specifically remember that Peter had something else that he wanted to ask about the chain of command at DOGE. It related to, clarifying something that Christopher Healy said during the hearing. And I was like, I want to ask who is the administrator of DOGE? And so then I asked the question and he throws back, I don't know the answer to that. And then we're walking and I'm like typing it up in my notes app. And I'm like, can you guys believe that? He said, I don't know. And they were like, wait, what? Because I remember being like, the administrator. And I felt crazy because Tyler and Peter were looking at me like, what? Why does this matter?
No, I
Yeah,
feel like
so-
then it began to cut
so-
through it.
so-
Yeah.
Right. So I think that actually that kind of captures the eccentricity of the whole story, which is that you've kind of merged this manic quest that nobody else seems to understand with a treatise on the appointments clause, and um and kind of woven them together. um and so we're gonna actually do a serious conversation about this, and why it all matters for the Lawfare podcast. We're gonna focus here on the comic elements of it, but just briefly, um, why should anybody care who the administrator of Doge is?
Yeah, so I mean, look,
As opposed to say what Doge is doing, or you know, uh, does Elon Musk suck, or like why does the WITAOD question actually
yeah.
matter?
So one reason that it matters, and I think this is the central focus of the why it matters in the story, although it matters for other reasons that I'll get to, but the main thing is the appointments clause. There's at least 3 suits that have been filed over the claim that Elon Musk and Doge wield unconstitutional significant authority in violation of the appointments clause. Under the appointments clause, it basically creates this kind of constitutional structure in which Congress creates these things called offices. So, positions that hold significant authority within government, and then the president has the power to fill those offices, right? And the idea is that these people who are known as officers of the United States, again, those are the people who wield particularly significant authority in a continuing position in government jobs. So that's people like the cabinet heads. And then those are separate from, just regular old employees. But these officers of the United States have to follow a certain kind of process. And the Constitution sets out different methods for those appointments. One way is Senate confirmation. And then there's some other circumstances. If you're an inferior officer, you can sometimes be appointed in other ways, so long as Congress allows it. It's complicated. We don't need to get into all that. We'll do it on the Lawfare podcast. But basically, there's this idea that you've got to follow this process. The default rule is Senate confirmation once the president's nominated you, especially if you're a principal officer. And none of that has happened for the administrator of Doge. And so there's this question of like, if Elon Musk is leading Doge and Doge is doing all these things like firing people, like dismantling federal agencies, and it's all the direction of Doge's leader, Elon Musk, the administrator, then, it matters for this factual issue within the appointments clause cases, because they've kind of got, the plaintiffs in those cases have this kind of problem where usually what you have in an appointments clause case is someone who is actually, has publicly said, oh yeah, I'm the administrator or I'm the leader of this government entity. And then there's just the question of whether or not they were properly appointed. But here we have this issue where you've got a guy who seems to be wielding all the authority of an officer of the United States, but he's saying that he's not actually the person in charge. And so that's kind of where my interest in all of this stuff with the administrator of Doge happened. And it kind of spiraled into, the administrator of Doge question stands for this larger inquiry of questions that relate to various things. In the FOIA cases, for example, there's this question of whether Doge is just advisory, whether Elon Musk is just advising the president, whether Doge is just advising the president. And that goes to this question of whether or not Doge is subject to a FOIA request. There's questions around, the ethical duty that is owed in court from Justice Department attorneys when they're telling judges with a straight face that Elon Musk is not a part of Doge, but then publicly he's out there saying that he's leading Doge. So there's all these other kind of subsidiary things too, but the main thing has to do with the appointments clause.
Can I just add? I think what you really crystallize in your piece when you write, WITAOD has become a proxy for a broader set of questions. Is DOGE really just advising? What kind of power does Musk actually wield? What's the organizational structure and chain of command? But getting real answers to those questions isn't just crucial in the appointments clause suits. So I also, I mean, everything you're saying I is completely true. And I also think WITAOD still has this symbolic and rhetorical power for if you can't even answer this most basic thing. It's just like so easy. Like just eventually they named someone, but I don't understand why they couldn't have earlier. If you can't even answer this basic thing, then how can you begin to answer anything else about this enterprise?
Right, and remember, like, putting aside all the legal stuff, right? Like, remember Elon Musk, who is, again, this guy who seems to be wielding immense authority within the federal government. And he's at a White House press conference standing next to the President of the United States saying, DOGE is the most transparent organization that there's ever been in government. We are maximally transparent. And at the time, we didn't even know what his role in DOGE officially or formally was. I mean, you couldn't even get answers from when judges asked Justice Department attorneys, you couldn't even get an answer in which they explain, oh, yeah, well, here's the reporting structure. Amy Gleason says there's not even an org chart for DOGE. So there's just a lot of basic things that, from a transparency perspective, and as someone who's a journalist who is transparency focused, it just drives me insane. And I think that's why I went down this, journey.
And it wouldn't matter if DOGE were purely advisory, right? So if, in fact, Elon Musk were cabined in the Eisenhower office building and were just sending memos to the president, who was then, directing cabinet officers to do things, you would say, okay, the lack of transparency is, that's what we allow the executive office of the president, as opposed to cabinet secretary who's subject to FOIA and FACA and things. But the thing that made it so complicated is that Musk is not, that's their position in court, that he's just advisory. But in fact, he's firing large numbers of people. He's, sending out the fork in the road memo. He's directing agencies to do things, and he's not making any secret about it, and Trump isn't making a secret about it. And so there's this radical disjuncture between the formal position of the Justice Department in court and the actual public posture of the president, which is partly what gives the matter this comic, other than your persona, what gives the matter this real comic extremity.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, you've got Elon Musk live streaming as there are emails going out to USAID employees telling them not to come into the office the next day. And he's live streaming on Twitter saying, and then that night he's also tweeting, I spent the weekend putting USAID through the wood chipper. And then you've got the president saying things like, oh, if the cabinet secretaries don't do the cutting, Elon will cut. And it, you've got all of these public statements, and I'm sitting there like what? Like, how can, and it just, even talking about it, Ben, it just makes me mad, as you can tell. And so that's why I was losing my mind, is because there is this really radical disjuncture between what I was seeing in court and then what I was watching everything happen publicly. And it just it started to make me feel like I was being trolled by public officials.
Well, you were. It just wasn't personal to you.
It felt personal, though.
Yeah. So here's my question: what has the reaction to this been? What percentage of the texts to you have been, you're nuts, girl.
Or you good, bro?
Yeah, I mean, you sound really unhinged. And what percentage of them uh, have been people identifying with uh, the persona of the manic, uh, obsessed Anna Bauer?
Oh no, virtually virtually everyone has identified with the maddening kind of element of it all and the persona. I think that people really appreciated that, like, this subject that is so frustrating was at the same time an entertaining read. And I think that was the goal, was like, if you have to read about how it seems like your government is misleading you about something really important, at least
Acting and destroying itself, ripping its own stomach open illegally.
right, then at least, like, you should be able to maybe get some laughs out of it. Because obviously it's not a funny subject. It's something that needs to be taken really seriously. But there's a lot of really, complicated legal issues in this subject matter, and it felt like the way to explain it to people in a way that they would actually keep reading was to make it kind of like a journey and make it fun. And I think that has really resonated with people.
And oh, sorry,
Go
go
ahead. So one person I got a laugh out of, because this piece is not this by any means, but this just made me laugh. They called it Great American Literature and compared it to Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Um, and I personally prefer to think of myself as like the Nathan Fielder of legal journalism.
I thought it
Which
was more
I don't know.
Joseph Heller, Catch 22, the way that everything's just tied into knots.
It has a
Yeah.
Joseph Heller quality. I think it also has a kind of um well, the putting yourself at the center of a drama that is self-evidently not about you has a definite sort of Dorothy Parker quality to it. Um, it's an interesting question, like what the sort of stylistic source material is for
Well,
the.
I actually went back and read Bridget Jones when I was writing the piece. Because when we talked about the piece
So
at
that's why
first,
it took so long. I'm just kidding.
yeah. This piece did take me an insane, like, honestly, it's kind of embarrassing. Part of it was that there were other pieces in between, and so I had to kind of
And
stop
also the
part.
story kept developing. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, I was
the
mostly
last
kidding.
diary entry in the story is literally yesterday.
Right, and
Which is
it
kind of perfect.
ends with Musk, leaving, so it was a good place to stop it, but or so-called supposedly leaving. But I went back because we talked about what the story would be and how to do it, and one of the kind of, if you had like one of those mood boards where you're like, what do they call it? A mood board, when you're like doing interior design and you like put up like all of your like inspiration. One of the main ones was like, this is going to be Bridget Jones's Diary meets The Appointments Clause. Um,
Well, 'cause Anna, your original idea was to simply catalog all the statements and to do a kind of, you described it as a diary of, you know, by day of the contradictory statements. And my reaction to that is, okay, that's fine. But what makes this work so well on social media is the persona of you being driven insane by it. And
right. And Go ahead.
No, and so like it should be filtered through the lens of like you pulling your hair out.
Yeah, what did
Yeah,
Quincy say?
and
The yellow wallpaper, I think she likened it to.
yeah, the yellow wallpaper for sure. But there also was like I made a joke about it once on Blue Sky or somewhere that like at first I was going performatively going crazy because I wanted people to pay attention to this and I was trying to get the idea across and I'm not talking about in the piece. I'm talking about, you know, when I started tweeting and posting about this and all that, that I wanted people to understand that this was important because sometimes especially with people when there are media organizations that have access to some of these people at the White House or whatever, they're maybe not paying as close of attention to the court cases that we are, and they're not in the room. And so they don't necessarily know, you know, oh, this is an important question that I should probably be paying attention to and that I should ask. And I don't have access to, you know, ask Elon Musk, ask Donald Trump, you know,
He hasn't given you his cell phone
he is
number?
not given me his cell phone number. I do have his
Which is
email address.
probably a smart move, Elon, because she'd be like texting you uh, uh, incessantly.
Yeah, we do have his email address, but he has never written back.
You don't call, you don't write, Elon.
Yeah, Elon. But yeah. So anyway, it's just there's this kind of element to it all where you know one of the jobs I think that we've always talked about at Lawfare that we one thing that we add in terms of value is like we identify the questions that are worth asking that maybe mainstream journalists like because they don't follow these cases as closely because they don't know the law like won't necessarily really know. Did we lose Ben? Oh, he's back.
Well, Ben, you're muted.
I'm here. I just had to rescue a pair of headphones from the puppy.
And I was wondering because I haven't asked you this yet. How do you feel getting this out there? Was it catharsis? Or is it just did you retain any of your sanity after, or did you leave it all on the page?
Uh, Left it all on the page. I could not be happier to have this story out in the world. It's like I want to warn everyone who has not read it yet. It is like almost 12,000 words, I want to say, maybe 11,000. It is a very long piece. It was even
It
longer.
used to be longer.
It used to be longer. And it took, I mean, quite literally, we've been talking about this piece for months. I think the only piece that I've ever taken a longer time to write was an actual investigative piece of journalism that I wrote, which was
Also
the
phenomenal.
which was another just totally zany, like, what? But yeah, I mean, look, it this piece was kind of a nightmare to write. It reads a lot more, it's more fun to read than it was to write, Tyler. Let me just say that. But I think in the end, it turned out well.
All right. We have 17 minutes. If you guys have questions, comments, screams of protest, howls of rage, cries of agony, cri de coeur, like WITAOD. Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm really upset right now because one reason that I was a little bit late, in addition to just the dog shirt happening at an insanely early time for someone who goes to bed at a late hour. I was trying to put a Zoom background
Oh,
on
WITAOD students.
no, it was actually a beach, and I wonder if either of you know why I was putting a beach background. And then I realized that we're going to be on Riverside, so imagine me with a background that is a beach. And pop quiz for Ben and Tyler, do you know which beach I was going to put as my background?
Um,
It has something to do with
Mexico.
yes.
Yes, because there is in the piece a part where Amy Gleason is named the administrator of DOGE and she is on the beach in Mexico.
While her team, her alleged team, is dismantling the federal government, she's
Right.
on vacation in Mexico.
Have you, so what kind of feedback have you gotten? Have you heard anything from Doge people about this piece?
No, I have not.
If they've noticed it yet.
I do wonder. So my question is, does John Roberts know about the WITAOD movement? That's my like main burning question. Is who we do shout out to Chief Justice John Roberts in the piece. Chief Justice John Roberts, if you're listening to Dog Shirt Daily, we
And
are
he does.
we are saving you a seat in the WITAOD movement. We welcome you if you would like to join, and you do indeed have something pending at the Supreme Court that relates to WITAOD.
Yeah, so what is currently before the Supreme Court related to Doge, related to WITAOD?
Yeah, so this was one of the most recent. I'm like pulling my hair out, going insane over this that happened about a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago it was now. This relates to some of the FOIA litigation that I was talking about. There's this question, right, about whether or not DOGE is subject to FOIA. And one of the arguments that the administration has made is that DOGE is solely an advisory body within the executive office of the president. So they just advise the president. Ben, as you explained, that's traditionally the kind of thing that would be subject to the Presidential Records Act, because there's a different kind of role that the advisory bodies within the EOP play than, something like an agency. And so under FOIA, there's this question about whether or not a body exercises independent significant authority, and if it does, that's the test, and if it does, then it's probably an agency subject to FOIA. And so there's been this ongoing kind of battle in the courts about whether or not DOGE is subject to FOIA. Citizens for Responsibilities and Ethics in Washington. I hope I'm getting that acronym correct. CREW sued over this issue. They got a favorable ruling from Judge Chris Cooper at the early stages of the litigation. And then when the government filed a motion to dismiss, they then sought some discovery because they wanted to get discovery on this question about whether or not DOGE is simply advising, which is the government's argument. And Judge Cooper said, okay, yeah, you can have discovery. You can depose Amy Gleason, the purported administrator of DOGE. So once this discovery order is issued, the government goes to the DC Circuit. The DC Circuit says no. And then finally, last week, they filed an emergency application at SCOTUS asking SCOTUS to stay that discovery order. They're arguing that it violates separation of powers, all of this. But in that brief, the thing that really had me going nuts is that Solicitor General John Sauer represents in that brief that Elon Musk is not part of the United States DOGE service. So this question of whether or not Elon is involved in DOGE is directly, being represented to the Supreme Court. And it relates to this kind of broader question of, in this discovery order, there are certain things and in this broader FOIA litigation, there are certain things that relate to whether or not, Elon documents related to Elon Musk need to be turned over and that kind of thing.
So we have at least three major pieces of active WITAOD litigation, right? One in the Supreme Court currently, that'll now in Judge Chutkin's courtroom that'll presumably be appealed to the DC Circuit, one in the Fourth Circuit. Are there others?
There's also, there's obviously there's some of this APA litigation that relates to DOGE sometimes has to do with these questions around like what were the actual circumstances of people being laid off, of agencies being dismantled, that kind of thing. Another thing that I will mention where this question of who is the head of DOGE has kind of come up in a or even the what is DOGE question has really played a central role. Is this one of these cases that originally was filed as a FACA case, the
Federal Advisory
Advisory
Committee
Committee
Act,
Act.
which is, by the way, one of the laws. It's not as fun to say as IEPA, but FACA is pretty fun to say.
Well, it is fun to say "fuck around and find out." Which was I
No,
believe
there's a lot of good FACA
there's
jokes.
so many good FACA jokes. But there were a number of suits that were originally filed as FACA suits because no one knew what DOGE was going to be. They basically filed before there was ever an executive order constituting DOGE. Ultimately, what we found out is that DOGE was renamed from a previous White House entity called the U.S. Digital Service. Previously, it was understood from public statements that Trump made ahead of being inaugurated that he was going to constitute this body outside of the White House kind of as an advisory committee. And it would be subject to various transparency requirements and all of that kind of thing. So a bunch of people sued over this. And then it turns out it was all different. So one of these suits, which is the Lentini versus DOGE suit, I believe that's the caption. It has been amended, and it's kind of complicated because there's this question in the suit. Like they still are arguing that DOGE actually there's a part of DOGE that is a federal advisory committee. Because the idea is that the government is saying like the U.S. DOGE service, which is the EOP body, is one thing that Elon Musk is not a part of. But then they're now arguing, they've had this shifting kind of understanding of what DOGE is, where they're now arguing there's this broader DOGE initiative. And that, the implication is that whenever people talk about Elon Musk being the head of DOGE, it's a reference to this broader.
It's like the Iranian constitution. You have the president, but then you have the supreme leader who, who's not formally part of the government. It's just, the supreme leader. Or the spiritual leader versus the active leader.
That's kind of what Musk said, right? There's one part in the piece where he's like, he can't leave it because it's like a movement and he's like the guru or something.
Right, and so they're trying to like parse it such that they're arguing that DOGE is different from DOGE, and and so that's kind of the argument. But in this suit, the plaintiffs are saying, well, there's at least some part of DOGE, whether that's, the broader DOGE or some other secret third DOGE, we don't really know. There's some part of DOGE that is acting as this, advisory committee role, and so it should be subject to FACA. There's kind of that kind of argument that they're making, and a part of this, and part of the thing that comes into that is this question about like what is Elon Musk's role and what's his involvement and what position, which DOGE is he involved in?
I gotta say, I do not understand how, if Hillary Clinton's healthcare task force is an advisory committee within the meaning of FACA, how you could possibly argue that DOGE is not, unless you take the view that DOGE is an agency exercising executive power. It seems to me it has to be one or the other.
Yeah, it seems like it does. I mean, one of the things that, so on this point about this like broad umbrella Doge that they are now trying to argue about, one of the things that kind of drives me crazy is that the government has this like really formalist perspective in a lot of its briefings across these Doge cases, where they will say, you just look at the title of people, you just look at the executive order and exactly what it says they do, you just look at what the executive order says Doge does. Don't look at anything that anyone's doing in practice, because that's not what you're supposed to do. You solely analyze the executive order. So that's one of their kind of overarching thematic things in their briefs.
All right, wait.
But
I don't have a lot of opportunity to get form and substance review jokes into dog
okay,
shirt,
go for it.
but I'm going to do it. In other words, they want the courts to do what OLC would call a form and substance review, where you just look at the text of the thing and you say, looks okay. They don't, but you don't look at the reality of the implementation of the thing, which has Elon Musk literally carrying a chainsaw.
Yeah. Yeah. So they exactly. So they have that on the one hand. But then when it comes to this question about like what Doge is and why people keep referring to Elon Musk as the leader of Doge, they'll say, oh, well, Doge doesn't just refer to USDS, which is what Doge as at its core was constituted as in the executive order. It's something else. But if you look at the executive order, the Doge structure is defined as three things and three things only. The United States Doge Service, a subset within the United States Doge Service called the Temporary Organization, or the Doge teams that go out to the agencies or are hired directly into the agencies. The government has said that Elon Musk is in charge of none of those things. So there's this real like disconnect between the very formalist position the government wants to take, and then when it's not convenient, they will say, oh, but Doge is just vibes. Like, so
I also think, all jokes aside, honestly, if you're being really formalist, what the president says has to matter.
right.
And the president has said repeatedly that Doge does things and that Elon is running it.
Well, and he says it specifically in relation to the executive order that he signed, right? And that's important for this question of like whether or not there's some kind of loose just umbrella Doge that is about the vibe or the lifestyle of Doge versus what was created in the executive order. There are public statements in which the president explicitly says, I signed in an executive order establishing Doge and I put Elon Musk in charge. And that executive order he's referencing on his first day in office is what created the United States Doge Service, which is what the Solicitor General now says Elon Musk is not a part of. It just drives you crazy when you think about it.
What did he say? He's like, it's a way of life, like Catholicism. You wouldn't ask who's in charge of Catholicism. You're like, well, there's someone actually.
All right.
Now, Tyler, you were the one who you were like, when we had that line about the Dalai Lama, you knew the Dalai Lama's full name. That I was very impressed by that. Not full name. I mean, like
His Holiness.
actual like formal title, which is quite long. So thank you for that.
All right. So we have 2 minutes left. What is the single most absurd moment in your entire experience as the WITAOD cult leader?
Like, what do you mean absurd?
I don't know. The word has a capacious understanding. I mean, when you think about ridiculous moments involving Doge and WITAOD, what is top of the list?
I mean, I feel like I've already gone through some of the some of the things. I will say, like, the day that we found out, the day they announced Amy Gleason as the administrator of Doge, was kind of like, it was like kind of hilarious. I compare it to that moment in have you guys seen Arrested Development? You know how there's Anne, the girlfriend, who people will be like Michael would be, it's Michael, right? Yeah, would be like, oh yeah, like Anne, and everyone would be like, her or like who,
Or who? Yeah.
and and like it, it just was this moment where it was like the administrator of Doge is Amy
Who?
Gleason? Like
Yeah.
and it was just really incredible that day. It was hilarious. The other thing I will say too that has been
Wait, we got to wrap.
oh right. Okay. There was someone who at a protest made a WITAOD sign and like went out and was like marching with a WITAOD sign, and that was pretty funny.
All right. For those who are asking for merch, yes, there is going to be WITAOD merch. In fact, in half an hour, we have our weekly Lawfare Administrative Committee meeting, and one of the items on the agenda is new merch offerings. And so we're going to be discussing WITAOD merch literally in half an hour. Look, folks, I know you don't want it to end, but we're going to be back. It's going to be on Monday. It's going to be beautiful. But we're going to take a couple days off. I'm going to go to the cabin. I'm going to work on some hardwood flooring. I'm going to go to, I have some sunflowers to put in the ground at the Paulina Sunflower Garden. And these fine people are going to try to take deep breaths and think about things other than the appointments clause, as should you.
And I'm gonna go find the administrator of Doge.
And Anna is going to not do that. She's going to continue her lonely quest. See you later.